Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And we have a full house today. Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John. I'd like to take this opportunity to start off with a correction. As a reader informed me, I said that only one Democratic ticket prior to this year featured a non-senatorial VP candidate, and that I mentioned 1972. But as a astute reader informed me, 1984's vice presidential candidate Geraldine Ferraro was a House member. So that makes 3 Democratic tickets since 1960, which have not featured a Senate sitting or former senator as the VP selection. Interestingly enough, 1972 and 1984, the Democrats both lost.
Wipeout. Didn't lose. Didn't just lose, man.
Yes.
25 points in 1972.
Terrible.
And to almost 20 points in
right. So I'm not making any predictions here. I'm just saying that is the historic precedent that lays before the Harris-Walz ticket.
Well, let's talk about the Harris-Walz ticket because we had a convention yesterday, and we are all the worse for wear.
We had an entire convention yesterday.
Yes, that fair enough. We had a convention that went. I didn't think that I could end an evening as bored and as late as the evening of Trump's speech, whatever that was, 2 years ago, 3 weeks ago. I can't even remember now, but it seems like it was an era ago. But I don't remember ever being as bored as I was but toward the end of that speech. And by the end of last night, boy, I was more bored. And I was more bored, and my ears were hurting because the signature feature to me last night of the 2 biggest speeches of the night, that was Hillary Clinton's speech and Joe Biden's speech, was, as my grandmother would say, what is he yelling? The yelling, not only was he yelled for 50 minutes, she yelled for about 25 minutes. And my eardrums, I don't know that they are ever going to recover. What is with the yelling? I understand wanting to convey passion and meaning and moment and all of that, but speeches require, even from senile old men and has-been old women, a little calibration.
I had a
little calibration.
I had a different
My understanding
reaction.
is that it's so he doesn't slur his words.
Biden only knows 2 volumes.
Yeah.
He knows the yelling and the whispering. Those are the only 2 volumes he does anymore. But I had a different reaction to Hillary's speech. I actually thought it was one of the better speeches of the evening. And it certainly got a big reaction from the crowd. Biden's speech, the most notable fact about it was that it didn't begin until after 11:30 p.m. on the East Coast. And then he went until after midnight. Designed, I think, to get him out of the news. To make sure that no one watched his speech, because the Democrats understand he's an unpopular president. He's the biggest liability for the Harris-Walz ticket. Also, it's funny that he gave the speech before literally being put out to pasture. Biden went on board Air Force One to Santa Ynez, California, where he's staying at the Kiani Preserve, an 8,000-acre ranch, which includes its own winery, for the following week. They're literally putting him out to pasture to graze, in his final days. One more point about the Biden speech. It was pretty unremarkable. It was basically his stump speech. It was clearly the speech he wanted to give on Thursday before Nancy Pelosi ruined his life and stole his presidency from him a few weeks ago. But it had a very disturbing comment when he talked about Israel. And when he talked about Israel, he didn't actually say Israel.
Can we hold this for a second? Can we just hold? Because I want to do a whole section on Israel. Just polling the team here. So I'm saying there was a lot of yelling. Matt said Hillary's speech was one of the better speeches of the evening. I don't agree, but it was a low bar on the good speeches. So maybe it was one of the better speeches just by default. Christine, Abe, Seth, where are you on the yelling?
I'm still trying to parse Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez's new accent, so that distracted me a bit. I don't like the yelling. I'm more on Matt's side of the Hillary speech. She just looked so grateful to be on the stage. She kind of seemed to really be enjoying herself, and she looked great. Like she kind of
she really did look great.
Yeah, she could be in a Nancy Myers movie. Like she just looked very very contented. Yeah. But I thought I agree. Biden's speech. It was no joke that he was pushed off until the very end of the evening, not in prime time. He seemed tetchy in that way that he often is these days. I thought Jill Biden was terrible, but there seems to be a lot of simmering resentment. It's like watching someone's dysfunctional family at Thanksgiving dinner, and everyone's like, "We're fine, we love each other," but I'm not buying it.
How about Ashley Biden, who to me sounded like a combination between RuPaul and Kathleen Turner? I don't think I mean, I know she spoke in 2020. I don't remember her speech, but I mean, she had this very deep and interesting way of saying he's a real girl dad. I was kind of startled by the whole thing.
I think you were sleep deprived by that.
I'm sorry. That's certainly true. Anyway,
I felt really bad for Chris Coons. They drag him out there. It's past 11 o'clock. This guy, he was going to be Secretary of State in a second Biden administration. Now he's got nothing, zip, nada. All he can do is talk about his good friend Joe Biden. And Chris Coons said, Biden never stops thinking about you. Except during the hours of 4 p.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning, then he has to sleep. But when he's awake, he never stops thinking about you, according to Chris Coons.
Look, the best part was Chris Coons came on right after Raphael Warnock, the senator from Georgia, who was, of course, a preacher, right? But Warnock's speech ends with this triumph. The crowd is on its feet because what did he say? He literally said, no child on this planet should have a cold. If a kid has a cold in America, we're there. If a kid has a cold in Gaza, if a kid has a cold in Ukraine, I am not kidding. If you missed this from Warnock, the Democratic Party has now gone from every child needs an education to no child left behind to no child on this planet should ever have a cold. My brain, I didn't make that up, and you may say that I was sleep deprived, but then the crowd thought it was the most exciting thing in the world, and then came out the sucker of all the energy from the room to introduce Jill Biden, to introduce Ashley Biden, to introduce Joe Biden, and America to the extent that it was watching. Okay, Abe, I'm sorry, we've been interrupting you. Please go ahead.
No, I
You're
was
like Biden
say,
now. You're like Biden. You're like being pushed out of prime time.
Yeah. We love Abe. What I was going to say is purely sonically, not only do I agree with you, John, about the yelling and how grating it was, but it was yelling interrupted by not nonsensical, but really dumb cheers. A lot of them. And that made it very hard to endure, especially as the hours dragged on. I did think, however, they landed a lot of sharp, effective blows against Trump. Whatever this night was.
Throughout the evening.
Throughout the evening. I didn't get a lot of joy. There wasn't a lot of joy that came through the yelling and the lock 'em up chants and whatever else they subjected us to. I thought it was hard to endure. But again, I do think they gave Trump an effective hard time overall.
I think the best. So I think maybe we can all agree that the most effective 15 minutes or 20 minutes was the abortion section, where they brought out that couple that they brought out like 4 different people who were either denied or would be denied or whatever, some form of treatment as a result of the Dobbs decision, the sort of classic horror story, governmental horror stories of Republican unfeeling blah 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 blah. And no matter how you slice it, that's emotionally effective, and the country, it appears, is more with them, at least in this realm, than it is with Republicans. And so you got a flavor of what kinds of things the Democrats are going to do to try to aim this one policy weapon that they seem to have in their quiver that Trump is completely unsuited to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point because it's the only policy weapon they have. You know, I watched a good amount of the convention last night. I heard very little about the economy. I heard a lot about Biden's infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act, but I heard very little about the economy. I heard nothing about the border. At one point, AOC talked about how Joe Biden's, no, I'm sorry, not Joe Biden, Kamala Harris fights for immigrants starting their American journey. And what she left out is, yeah, they start their journey by scrambling over the southern border and trying to get an asylum designation so that they can be moved to another state or city inside the interior of the country. So abortion is really the only issue they had, it seemed to me. Everything else was kind of gauzy. Hillary Clinton spoke a lot about breaking the glass ceiling and kind of portrayed herself as a pioneer, one figure in a whole series, leading up to Kamala Harris potentially as the first female president. Biden gave a long kind of, rambling smorgasbord defense of his presidency. And then there were a lot of talk about Trump as the criminal. A lot of people called Trump a lifelong criminal. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas gave a long speech where she talked about Kamala Harris as a prosecutor. Jamie Raskin gave a very partisan speech about January 6th and democracy. So the only real policy issue they had was abortion. And in fact, I think that's something Ashley Biden said when she said, for freedom, democracy, and reproductive rights, we must support Kamala Harris. And now reproductive rights is the same as these basic American
It's like
values.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
There's also
pursuit of reproductive rights.
They also did a lot of rewriting of recent history that I found galling, absolutely galling, and that has to do with COVID. Yes, so they had this this video of all these clips of Trump, downplaying COVID at the beginning of COVID, in the way that only Trump is capable of doing, seeming glib. And then they talked about how they reopened the schools. They literally, this party is completely propped up by the teachers' unions, which kept schools closed and did so in a way that was full of subterfuge and imposing on public health. And Randy Weingarten gave an insane speech while there at the convention.
Randy Weingarten, head of the American Federation of Teachers.
Of the American Federation of Teachers. So this idea that now they're trying to they're trying to take education back as an issue that Democrats have strength on, which they have in the past had, but lost deservedly so during and after COVID. So that kind of lie, those are just lies. They actually, every blue city, and I speak from experience living in one, every blue city, every blue state kept schools closed far past the point that were necessary because of their beholdenness to the teachers' unions.
Okay, I wanted to ask you guys this question because it's interesting. So COVID was a word that was barely spoken, or term, whatever you want to call it, was barely spoken at the Republican convention, though the Republican Party was unified, as it has been unified on very little aside from Trump, about the excesses of COVID governance, right? In some ways good, right? This, over this kind of weird state by state totalitarian seizure of the rights of private businesses and people to worship and all of that, to frankly dangerous stuff like the sort of anti-vax mood and spirit. There was a lot of COVID talk last night. I mean, there was a lot, and I frankly don't understand it politically, because I assume that it's not really good for people to be reminded of COVID. Our old colleague Noah Rothman has said, and I think was right to say in 2020 and 2021, that when the pandemic is over, people are never going to want to hear about it again, the way they didn't want to hear about the Spanish flu in 1918, because it's too painful and it brings up too much. But I don't really understand why They talked about COVID that much. Okay.
I have a take because COVID, by virtue of the course of the disease and its evolution, is no longer what it was. They sort of ride on the fact that it's no longer plaguing us, as if they did it. And because COVID and the lockdowns had sunk the economy, they now just sort of piggyback on the fact that there has been some recovery from that, as there naturally would be. So there's a built-in recovery story that, through their efforts to hinder, they still want to take credit for.
Because it's a real memory hole.
Republicans let them have the vaccine issue, which was the main tool to that road to recovery. The vaccine, there was an initial period where COVID really was, we didn't know how to treat it, how to deal with it. And the hospitals didn't really know. There were all the arguments over, should everybody be on ventilators? Maybe nobody should be on ventilators. There was this whole category. And in that period, the vaccine broke through as something that gave people hope, like a way to look down the road and see, the other side of this thing. And then COVID sort of, as you say, transformed into something. It's like, Michael Crichton's book, The Andromeda Strain, is about sorry for the spoilers, but it's about this infection that continues changing ever so slightly until it becomes totally benign. And the whole book is about people rushing to do something to solve this health crisis, and the health crisis solves itself. I think that's kind of what's going on here, which is that they were nowhere to be found. Trump was in office. He did the vaccine program, but he won't take credit for it because of the way Republican base voters react.
Well, he doesn't. But it's sort of an orphan,
right? My theory is,
but Democrats are very big on the vaccine. Did you get your shot? Did you, whatever, all that stuff?
They weren't talking about the shot. I think Abe's right.
My theory is the Democrats think it was a huge success. That for the Democrats, the way that the Biden administration handled COVID was the way government should work. And this is another example of how the messages
it's not a pandemic anymore.
Excuse me?
Wait till it's not a pandemic anymore.
What?
No, I mean shutting down,
mandate vaccines
and make it rain with
mandate
taxpayer
masks,
money.
Close the schools.
Shutting down.
That's how government should work. Listen to Fauci.
They were there last
Fauci
night
knows everything.
We didn't close schools.
Don't
Their
question Fauci.
No, they said
they had masks. People were wearing masks in the convention last night.
Yeah.
Half the Democrats think that COVID is still going on. Right. They think that COVID, this is a big success story for them. It's proof of concept of their view of government. That's why they were talking about it. I'll tell you who opened the schools. It wasn't Kamala Harris. It was Glenn Youngkin. When Glenn Youngkin won the governor's mansion in Virginia, that's when the schools opened in the blue states, because the Democrats knew they were in for a big reckoning if they didn't do that.
Well, the parents who brought lawsuits should also be given a shout out.
But I think Matt's right. So what's interesting here, that's why I say it's an interesting political get. You're right that maybe they're speaking from their hearts about government action to help people, no matter whether people want the help or whether the help is effective or whether or not it's kind of violative of the Constitution. It was politically extraordinarily damaging to them just 3 years ago. Youngkin wins. DeSantis ends up winning 60% in Florida in 2022. Yeah. There is a reversal of affect in the country that Trump again interferes with in 2022 with his idiot Senate choices. But the mood of the country was that they had had enough of this, and that the party that had advocated the activist measures was being punished by voters. Then it kind of stopped because of Dobbs and because of Trump's interference in 2022. Now they seem to be trying to retcon their failure into a success. I still think that politically they would be better served to have left it to the side. Reminding people might remind people, even if they love it in the hall. They got to talk to that 10% of people who's going to decide the election.
Yeah. The Democrats don't have much of substance. They got vibes. That's why we're running on joy and vibes and how happy we are. And let's play the freedom song and show the video of all the happy people. That's all they have. Otherwise, they have what? COVID, Biden's COVID record. They have Project 2025, where the Michigan state senator came out with this huge oversight. Now, I thought the regular Project 2025 was big. It's about as thick as a phone book. I have it in my office at AEI, but she came out with like this oversized version of it and said, this is Project 2025. Then you had Jim Clyburn say that Project 2025 is Jim Crow 2.0. And look, Jim Clyburn, I have a lot of respect for. He has lived quite a life, and he's a remarkable individual in many ways. But how many things has he compared to Jim Crow over the course of his career? Because just a couple years ago, it was the Georgia election law that he was calling Jim Crow 2.0. Now Project 2025 is Jim Crow 2.0. And then abortion. So those are the three things the Democrats have issue-wise in this election. And I expect we're going to hear a lot more about them for the rest of the weweek.
Can we talk about the Michigan State legislature
thing? I thought that what she did with the Project 2025 thing reminded me of when people have a paper to write in high school and they forget until the last minute, so you triple space the spacing on the page and you bump up the typeface to like 16. Yeah.
Let's assume that people weren't watching. So her name is McMorrow. She's a Michigan state legislator who, interestingly enough, until 2016, was an employee of Gawker, the website that was, as you may remember, sued out of existence by Hulk Hogan. Her husband, a salesman for Gawker, who then became the editor of Jalopnik, the car Gawker.
That was must read.
Yes. So she came out and she had like a teller of fairy tales at Drag Time Story Hour. She had a book that said Project 2025 on it that was 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide. And we are going to see that book every night. She said, we'll be back throughout the week to highlight the evils of Project 2025. Her name is McMorrow. I can't remember her first name. We're going to see her again. That was at Mallory McMorrow. She was a good speaker.
She went viral a couple years ago, I think.
Okay, yeah,
on something. I think on Drag
somebody on the abortion. She had a fight
on abortion.
With another Michigan state legislator and made a speech and said, "How dare you?" And
she said, "Project 2025 is the Republican plan to turn Trump into a dictator."
Right. So I think
she also said he's going to weaponize the DOJ and put his enemies in jail. I'm like, that's probably a little on the nose. You shouldn't mention that given recent history.
Yeah. Okay. So what interested me is I thought she was, in other words, in these surprising moments, like where you're looking for, it's like, it's like spring training or something, your tryouts you're auditioning for the High School Musical and somebody comes in and sings, I dreamed a dream, and you're like, oh my God, who is that? Like she was that person for me. I thought that was, though, of course, I hated everything she said. As a piece of performance, she was incredibly comfortable. She's very attractive. We're going to see her again. And the other big surprise to me was AOC, who annoys the hell out of me. And of course, I loathe everything about her. And Christine said she's now talking in a different accent, but she knew how to ride the wave of that crowd's enthusiasm. I mean, that was a very natural kind of star performance. And that's not to say
because she lives her life on Instagram, John. But
that doesn't mean she knows how to work.
No, she's a star.
A 15,000 person crowd.
Yeah,
and how to talk over them without being rattled. How to trust that the teleprompter person who's running will stop the teleprompter or will keep it going as she's trying to speak. Like that's a performance skill that you either have or you don't sort of naturally. And it turns out that she has it. And that's frightening.
This was her first in-person DNC. If you recall, the 2020
right, yeah.
DNC was virtual, and she did speak briefly, I think, introducing Bernie Sanders in the 2020 DNC. So this is her first time before the major live stadium-sized audience.
If you're scared
she did very well.
If you're scared of her, you should be more scared of her, is what I'm saying, because she showed chops that we didn't really know that she had.
Well, can we spend a moment on her for a second? Because in many ways, this is her party. If you recall, just 6 weeks ago, when Pelosi and Obama were pushing Biden aside, Sanders and the squad, including AOC, stood by Biden's side. And AOC even told one newspaper that this matter is settled. The matter is settled. I will not entertain any objection that Biden will be the nominee.
We're all behind Genocide Joe 100%.
Yeah, right. And now, of course, as soon as they make the switcheroo, she's all behind Kamala Harris. Why? Because I think the progressive left and the socialist squad know that they're in the catbird seat in the Democratic Party. And policy-wise, they're going to call the shots.
That's amazing, because what happened politically in the last 8 weeks, two of the five squad members were defeated in Democratic primaries.
Yeah, the squad 2.0 was defeated. The core squad still exists, but the people who won in 2020,
right?
Cory Bush and Jamal Bowman both went down. Now, here's another reason why AOC is a star, though. And why I think her speech and Hillary's were the best of the night. But, of course, this might be Hillary's last convention. We don't know. AOC is very good at hiding her radicalism. And this is the test for success in the Democratic Party. How well can you mask your agenda? How well can you come across as someone who is relatable and a compelling speaker? Was that a COVID
joke, Matt?
Yeah, right. She did it very well. She talked about her experience as a bartender. She did not get into the issue. She had one line on the ceasefire in Gaza, which in many ways was less radical than what Biden said.
Right.
In his speech.
Again, we got to get to that as its own section.
In any case, she didn't talk about Medicare for all or Green New Deal. She was very clever in the way that she presented herself to the American people. And that's why I do think that she has a future. Of course, the worst thing that could happen for AOC is that Harris wins, because then that pushes everything back potentially for another 8 years.
She's so young. I mean, we forget what is she, 32? I mean, she is so young that we're talking about somebody we might have on our radar long after I'm dead. I mean, I'm 63. If she lives a Pelosi life, she could be in public life for another half century. Very easily.
Okay, well, thanks for ruining my day, John.
I'm sorry, but you know what's not going to ruin your day? You know, it's not what you need is some Boll and Branch sheets, Matt.
That's true.
Because, you're tossing and turning at night. You're unable to get comfortable because you're just too hot. Either you're too hot because it's too warm out, or you're too hot because the Democrats made you angry. One leg under the blanket, one leg sticking out, still not finding the right balance. Well, Boll and Branch is here to help you never sleep hot again with sheets that are woven to allow airflow and feel cool and crisp to the touch, perfect for sleepers who run hot. Boll and Branch has amazing options. For hot sleepers, choose from 100% organic cotton percale that's made with a naturally cooling weave, or their linen, which is made from European flax to be light, airy, and softer than soft. Look, the quality, you can't deny it. They're loved by millions of sleepers. Abe sleeps on them. They fit the deepest of mattresses. They're labeled with top and bottom text, so making your bed is easier than ever. And best of all, Boll and Branch gives you that 30-night worry-free guarantee with free shippings and returns on all orders. So get your coolest, most comfortable sleep with Boll and Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets when you use promo code commentary at bollandbranch.com. That's BOLLANDBRANCH.com. Promo code commentary for 15% off plus free shipping. Exclusions apply. See site for details. Wanted to talk about the Parson Weemsification. I mentioned this yesterday, but it was really striking last night. The effort to introduce Kamala Harris to the American people as a wonderful human being. And I'm sorry, but give me a break. Literally, childhood friend, 2 different stories about how she confronted a bully in the schoolyard and how she helped some young girl who was having it was not clear, like a relative was molesting her or something, and she took the relative to the authorities. And so from her very earliest life, the early days in which she, remember, said in her stroller when she was going to the march that she was going there for freedom, we are now to understand that Kamala Harris has been a person of empathy since before, because she stood up to bullies and she helped people. And then Jasmine Crockett told the most demented story where Jasmine Crockett is elected to the Congress and comes to Washington, and she's a new congressman. Yeah. And the Republicans can't settle on a speaker. Remember the 15 votes, and she was very, very disturbed by the dysfunction.
And also the oversight committee. She mentioned that.
Oh, and the oversight committee was just
out of control.
And just terrible. And so she's on the oversight committee, and they can't settle on a speaker. And she goes, and for some reason she's at a meeting, and Kamala Harris is at the meeting, and she's never met Kamala Harris before. And Kamala Harris comes over to her and says, "You seem like something's wrong."
What's wrong?
What's wrong?
What's wrong? First words.
And tears began to flow from Jasmine Crockett's eyes,
and she almost cried on stage.
She did. She had to hold herself back from the tears. They were welling up, Matt. They were welling up. She had to give her a moment.
Let me tell you, Jasmine's another person who I think is going to be around for a while.
Yes,
and
I agree.
She uttered words during that speech that I never thought I would ever hear in my life, and the words were these: Amanda Gorman said it best.
Yes, okay, fair enough. Now, what happened was tears are welling in her, tears coming down her cheeks, and Kamala Harris says to her, "You are where God wants you to be right now." Now, I'm perfectly willing to believe that this story happened, though I'm also perfectly willing to believe that it didn't. Nonetheless, the story, taken literally and as though it happened, is demented. She's crying. She gets elected to Congress. She's in the majority. She's crying in front of the vice president because she's not enjoying herself. And she needs to be okay.
This is a perfect story for what has happened to the Democratic Party, which is it's become feminized, over emotional, and very much about vibes and feelings. That's why she doesn't even have any policies listed on her platform.
Website.
No, this is actually perfect. It's the perfect introduction.
I thought that the childhood friend was pretty good. Stacey Johnson Baptiste. They told the story in the video of Kamala standing up to the bully and taking a rock to the head and having to get stitches.
Yeah.
And then Stacey Johnson Baptiste came out with her mother to the stage, and they talked about how on Friday nights, she and her mother, and then Shamala and Maya and Kamala Harris would all pile into the 1966 Mustang of Stacey John Baptiste's mother and go out to a movie or something like that. And Stacey Johnson Baptiste said, "And my mom still has that Mustang." And the mother said, "Yes, I do." I thought that was actually one of the more human moments of the entire evening. And it was, I would actually have liked a little bit more of that, because the truth is, no one knows anything. Well, I would like to see the Mustang.
That's a 60-year-old car.
She should have driven out onto the stage
on the Mustang. That would have
in it. Yeah, exactly. That would have been something.
That's Joe's move. Come on.
People don't know much about Kamala Harris at all. And so this was one moment. Okay, all right. She's seen, here's a childhood friend. She has friends, at least something like that. Otherwise, you had these recurring images from the presidential box where you had Doug, who... she didn't marry Emhoff until she was 50 years old.
Yeah, 10 years
And then, as a friend texted to me during the evening, my friend said, Doug Emhoff is sitting next to a Hamas supporter. And I said, who? And my friend said, his daughter. And,
yes.
And so then they showed it. You would see Emhoff and Ella Emhoff and her new husband, and it's like this, America's first family.
Ella Emhoff was wearing a baseball cap and a T-shirt so that she could show off her tattoos on her arms, and she looked very out of sorts. And Doug Emhoff looked very out of sorts, like he wasn't sitting there beaming with delight at his wife's ascension to the possible pinnacle of world power and American history. He looked
he
nervous
just went through a news cycle about him cheating on his first wife with the nanny. And
but that was a couple of weeks ago. That was also like a year ago already.
Well, maybe it hit home to Doug that she might be president, and it's as disturbing to him as it is to me. I just have one more thing about these honorifics. He's the second gentleman. That was a new title that we bestowed on him. And then when, of course, Dr. Jill came out, there was the First Lady of the United States. Okay, First Lady. But then when they introduced Ashley Biden, they said, please welcome the first daughter of the United. When did that extend to the children? Why are we giving the children these titles? It makes no sense to me. They didn't do anything. Have you ever heard someone referred to as the first daughter before?
She is the first of her name. She is the daughter of the Andals.
Yeah, right.
And it was
Queen of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, it starts turning into the Game of Thrones citation of the holder. I just
had never heard that. No, I don't think anyone called Ivanka the first daughter before.
No, I think the Clintons was the only other one was the only other one was Clintons.
Well, that would be good. And here is the second daughter of the United States, and let me tell you, she's the second daughter. Tiffany.
That makes Hunter the first son.
Well, he did. Joe did get Hunter's name in there at the very beginning. You'll notice Hunter, no sign of Hunter physically.
Oh, he was in the wings. No, there's
at the end. He came out at the end.
He did come out at the end. Okay, all right. So now,
by the way, Chelsea Clinton does get called the first daughter and former first daughter and stuff. That was the older one who that's following the model. By the way, that's the whole point of this following the Hillary model.
I guess we have Ella Emhoff will be the first daughter of the United States.
The first stepdaughter? The first tattooed daughter?
Did Kamala adopt them or
no?
So they're stepchildren.
Their mother. They have their mother who was cheated on with the nanny.
Right. So the first stepdaughter.
Yeah, the first
modern
stepdaughter.
Family.
Well, yeah, whatever. Okay, so we get to the substance that we really need to delve into, and I think it's pretty shocking, and I think that it's going to wear badly, and not just on us. The only moment of substance in the course of the convention, in many ways, at least in terms of issues that are directly facing the American people this week. So there were protests outside in the city. I don't know whether they fizzled or whether the media deemed them to have fizzled. In the minute that they started, we were being given notice that they were smaller than the protesters had hoped they would be. Nonetheless, they did march to the arena and tore through the barricades and stuff like that. And there was a moment during Biden's speech when a banner. This is a funny thing. A banner was unfurled that said "Free Gaza" or something like that, and apparently,
it said "Stop arming Israel."
Oh, stop arming Israel! And then apparently, a couple of guys sitting behind the people who unfurled the banners punched the banner holders on the head from above, and got them to drop the banners. And then others grabbed the banner. But I mean, apparently there were physical altercations to prevent this banner from being held up for more than a couple of seconds. So in some sense, what unless more happens this week, there was a kind of triumph yesterday in suppressing the Gaza scene, right? In suppressing the efforts by radical protesters to disrupt the convention that we've been talking about for months.
Let's wait and see what Ella Emhoff has up her sleeve.
Okay, well, that's a good way. But I mean, we also don't know, are they keeping their powder dry for Thursday night when, of course, the entire country will be watching, or or did they shoot their, did they play the hand they had to play yesterday? And the truth is that people are so eager to get Trump out and get that there is a kind of conspiracy even in the radical protest crowd that says, let's not do this now. I don't know. I doubt it, but maybe Iran called them off because Iran doesn't want Trump to be president. I mean, I'm not joking, by the way. There are reasons to believe that there's Iran funding behind some of the protest movement, and so if they're getting messages from their paymaster somewhere, and the paymasters either at the Open Society Foundation or the Tides Foundation or Iran are saying, cool it, that could happen.
I mean, there is a reason why the protests are fizzling more, and that's because of the identity politics of it. When Joe Biden was president, there was nothing stopping people from saying the old white guy doesn't care that we're bombing brown people. That was the narrative. That is not the narrative with Kamala, first of all, because people don't believe that Kamala agrees with Joe on this stuff. And Senator Gary Peters yesterday was interviewed at the convention of Michigan, and Democratic Senator of Michigan, and he said that he thinks Kamala should and maybe will come out publicly and differentiate herself from Biden, waiting till after maybe the convention to do so. But there's a sense that the shift is coming. So one is the assumption that Kamala doesn't agree anyway. But the second is that when Kamala was handed the baton, we had white women for Kamala and white dudes for Harris, Zoom calls and all this other stuff. You can't have the kind of minority-focused protests without white liberals. They're the numbers, and they're the ones who have often in the Brooklyn wine moms that we make fun of so much on here are actually quite crucial to the movement because they have disposable income and time. And again, the numbers, you look at college campuses, and that's where were the protests hottest? At places like Columbia, places where there were no Pell Grant recipients. There were no working class students at these places. This is a movement where you need the people who now have been guilted into pledging their undying loyalty to Kamala Harris as a way to exercise their own racial demons, et cetera, et cetera. It's identity politics.
I think that the one reason the protests may be, smaller than expected, at least for day one, is that the protesters are winning the fight in the Democratic Party. I mentioned it at the top of the show. I am agog at this paragraph in Biden's speech.
Yes,
I just
please,
want to read you the speech. Here's Biden, quote, "And we'll keep working to bring hostages home and end the war in Gaza and bring peace and security to the Middle East. As you know, I wrote a peace treaty for Gaza." I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Biden continues, "A few days ago, I put forward a proposal that brought us closer to doing that than we've done since October 7th. We're working around the clock, my Secretary of State, to prevent a wider war and reunite hostages with their families and surge humanitarian health and food assistance into Gaza now, to end this civilian suffering of the Palestinian people and finally deliver a ceasefire and end this war. These protesters out in the street, they have a point. A lot of innocent people are being killed on both sides. Both sides. Where do those words come up again and again in the rhetoric of the Democratic Party?
Said that right after the Charlottesville line. Right after the
What words did he not say? What words did he not say?
He didn't say Israel. He never says Israel or Hamas. Yes. And there were Hamas flags at the protest outside the convention center, it should be noted.
This is why I attending one of the breakout sessions.
The question of whether Kamala at some point is going to distance herself from the Biden position is superfluous. He's come to the Kamala position.
Okay, it is a very weird phenomenon. So he is taking credit for a peace treaty that he wrote that is not a peace treaty. Okay, first of all, it's not even a ceasefire proposal. It is called a bridging document.
The bridge.
We don't even know what that means because we haven't seen it and we don't know the details. And we know that Hamas has rejected it.
Again.
So it's not a treaty. And we know that Bibi Netanyahu has accepted it. And then Hamas said, well, we accepted a version of it last week, but then Bibi added things to it, and now we don't accept it. But we don't know what it is. We're supposed to find out on Thursday or something. I don't think we'll find out on Thursday because, of course, Kamala's speech is on Thursday. And meanwhile, just to underscore what's actually at stake and what is actually happening, overnight, after Biden finished speaking, the Israelis revealed that they had found 6 more hostage bodies in Gaza. Now, I'm not going to blame the United States for a hair being disturbed on the head of a hostage, of an Israeli hostage in Gaza. But this war has been going on now for 10 months. And one of the reasons it has gone on for 10 months and wasn't over 5 months ago is that the United States made it very clear in December and January that Israel had to slow down and chill out. And the things that have happened in the last 3 months could have happened 3 months or 4 months earlier. Were those hostages dead in January? I don't know that we'll know. Maybe not. Maybe they were killed on October 7th and they were brought into Gaza. But the reclamation effort to find out what is the status of the hostages, we genuinely don't know. Bibi Netanyahu has had to stipulate that, and this is one of the things that supposedly is a toughening of the Israeli position that Hamas doesn't want to accept. Stipulate that if there's going to be a deal and hostages are to be returned to Israel, Israel will only take the live hostages first if they are to cease fire. Think about this for a minute. Israel's position, which is apparently controversial, is that they want to recover the living hostages who have been living in hell, in the 7th circle of hell, for 10 months. And Joe Biden is saying those protesters outside, they have a point. Olivia Reingold of the Free Press went yesterday to the encampments. Go find footage of the conversations that she had with people in those encampments, particularly a conversation that a guy who apparently was investigated by the FBI in 2011 for ties for terrorism had with a Jewish protester who said, I'm a proud supporter of Kamala, and I want her to know that there are more voices than your voice, and don't we all get a voice? And he was like, you're a bug. You're a sickening cockroach of a Zionist pig. You pig Zionist cockroach.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. And basically was physically intimidating, threatening, and then turned on Olivia Reingold and was like, are you going to come at me too? Are you going to come at me too? That's who the encampment protesters who have a point are. They're psychopathic monsters. And the president of the United States is saying that they have a point. In 1969, Richard Nixon walked from the White House to the reflecting pool at night to go among the Vietnam protesters encamped there to ask them what it was that they wanted of him and what it was that was bothering them. It's kind of an extraordinary moment, but people don't know that it ever happened. It was 55 years ago or whatever. Could Joe Biden walk through the encampment and say, really, talk to me, tell me what you're feeling?
Well, could he walk through the encampment? Just physically, could he do it? That's another question too.
Okay. So the position of the United States is we're on the verge of a supposed bridging deal that will lead to a potential he's taking credit for the ceasefire in the speech. He's taking a ceasefire that has not yet happened. There is no ceasefire. He's taking credit for the ceasefire from the peace treaty that he wrote, because of course he sat down with a pen and paper and wrote a peace treaty.
Project 2025. You can look it up.
Yeah. And he's saying the protesters have a point because too many people are dying on both sides. You know how many people are dying in Gaza on the side of on the Palestinian side? Almost nobody. It's so much almost nobody that the Hamas Ministry of Health makes a point when there's an Israeli action of issuing a number in the double digits that is then, this has now happened twice in the last 2 weeks, that is then wildly radically revised down because there's an Israeli action, maybe an Israeli action to recover bodies of hostages, or because they have actionable intelligence on where Hamas leaders are, and they're going in and finding them and rooting them out, and then they're killing people along the way you do when there are people guarding people in a tunnel who are members of Hamas. So that is what's going on. The death toll is not, there is no ongoing large-scale military action. There are pinpoint, intelligence-driven missions aimed at specific targets that are encountering resistance from other Hamas fighters, and they are being killed. And if you hear that it's children and women, don't believe a word of it. And you know that. People who are listening to me know that. But, you know, both sides.
Can I just make two other observations about national security? Because I think it's interesting amidst this celebration of Joe Biden's legacy. Again, his daughter, Ashley, called him one of the most consequential leaders in history. And he's been likened to George Washington. And since withdrawing from the race, Nancy Pelosi says he deserves a spot on Mount Rushmore. It's not only the mess in the Middle East, it's also Ukraine invaded Russia a few weeks ago, and that's going on too. A pretty amazing maneuver that you don't hear a lot about. And that war is ongoing. He made a brief reference to it in his State of the Union-like address last night, but no real strategy or really even commentary on what's going on in that theater of war.
One second there. He said, Vladimir Putin thought he was going to take Ukraine in 3 days. It's been 3 years. Biden thought Putin was going to take Ukraine in 3 days.
Also, it hasn't been 3 years. Can I just say it hasn't been 3 years? It's been it hasn't even been 2.5 years.
Felt like 3 years. Felt like 3 years.
Yeah,
but here, there's a
just one more thing on foreign policy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about this on the show, and that is the China-Philippine conflict is also heating up in recent weeks. And just the other day, there was a huge incident where the Chinese are ramming Philippine naval craft and sea craft. And this is another flashpoint that could easily turn violent. And so this celebration of this legacy, it's good for the Democrats to get it over with and to push Biden past everyone's bedtime, because the more people think about Joe Biden, the more they want a change. And the Democrats' mission now is to pretend that Trump is the incumbent and Kamala is the change.
Okay, so let
I just say one thing.
Seth, let me move on. I want to move on because I have an important. So this was the Biden night, and it was like old home week because you had Hillary introducing Biden effectively, and now that's over. And I think the question is, to what extent Kamala Harris will be a representative of this administration, or whether from this point forward, almost no mention will be made of the Biden administration. Christine, what mention would you make of the Biden administration if you were, because she is now introducing herself, and she has no need of the Biden administration. In fact, she may want to separate herself from the Biden administration.
No, it's going to be the second thing of the two things you had on offer, and that's why they had him in the first night, and why he's physically leaving the convention. Actually, the Obamas are I think also scheduled to leave before she gives her big speech on Thursday. But she's got to try to reinvent herself and separate herself from from the administration of which she's been a part. And the media will enable that throughout the convention. Whether they'll continue to do that, given the fact that the logistics of the convention have kept a lot of the media, credentialed media, from even getting into it for hours and hours waiting in line, which will make them restive and angry and more prone to write catty things about Kamala. I think we have to wait to see if she's successful in doing that rebranding. We've seen so many rebrandings of Kamala Harris. So I don't know, but she will definitely have every incentive to not talk about Joe Biden, mention Joe Biden. He's going to become the same sort of omerta that the word Israel has been at the Democratic convention, right? Biden and Israel are the two things that must not be spoken of after night one.
Abe, what do you think? You're on mute.
No, I think this is this was really his send off, and I think it's supposed to stick. He's not supposed to keep peeking his head back and reminding the American people that he's president. That's we are supposed to be left with a much different impression from that. Yeah,
just like the vaccine. So there is Trump. It works, right? Operation Warp Speed works. They get the vaccine. The vaccine starts being administered before he leaves office, and he leaves it to one side. If, in fact, a ceasefire is achieved between Israel and Gaza, will this administration want to take a lot of public credit for it? I'm not sure. I mean, not the administration, but the Harris campaign, Democrats in general, they have this weird problem, which is that they have a rump that wants Hamas to win.
They'll say that Harris was, integral to the negotiations that led to the success of the bridging proposal. Just as apparently, I learned this last night. She was behind the prisoner swap. She was in the room negotiating with the Russians to release Evan Gershkovich and Vladimir Kara-Murza and the others. I didn't, it was news to me. But so they'll frame any possible quote unquote achievement
success
of the Biden administration as an achievement for Harris. But I know we're running late. But I do have one question for the panel, because we're on the second day of the convention today, and something unusual is happening. This is the Obama's night, but Harris and Walz are actually leaving Chicago to hold a rally in Milwaukee in the arena where Trump accepted the nomination, to show that they can fill that arena. But it seems to me that kind of like cuts against the programming at the convention. Or are people will MSNBC show Harris, or are they going to show who's speaking? It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, this is important, and I'll keep it short. But there's been a strange tone of pettiness about a lot of the Harris campaign, and this is an example of it. It's like, we're going to show Donald Trump, but I've been keeping track of some of these sort of catty. It's a cattiness, right? Like, for planning purposes, reluctantly is what they put on a lot of their media advisories. And that, they beamed this Project 2025 headquarters on a Trump hotel.
The Trump building. Mm-hmm.
And weird as hell, another phrase they beamed up there. So there's a kind of, again, maybe they're trying to be very online in this sort of tone, but I find it disconcerting and frankly kind of childish. And I think this is part of that.
Well, if they're not there in the hall, it means that I won't be able to enjoy the reaction shots of Gwen Walz, who really got into all the speakers. And, when she was moved, she does this thing where she moves her head from side to side as she claps, rapidly. And I almost felt entranced by her movements.
I was struck by Tim Walz's.
Oh my God. What a
set mouth.
Performer.
So weirdly, he looked like he was about to cry. His lips.
He curls his both lips inward. Yeah.
And so
Clinton would do the lower lip.
Tim Walz like does the both. Heat miser. If you think of the heat miser, like his lips go and then they turn down like a Fu Manchu mustache. And it was like he was like that for 2 hours. Like he was overwhelmed with emotion, and he has slightly cartoon character quality to his face.
Such a phony.
But anyway, I don't know what to make of that Milwaukee trip. I think probably a lot of ideas are being thrown around in the room, and people are like, let's do that. And so they don't like think it through, or they don't have like a professional long time, maybe because they don't trust the Biden people, and also the Biden people didn't run a convention in 2020. Like there are people who could have helped them program last night. I know everybody thinks that they wanted Biden to speak after midnight. There was too much. They could have, like the Tonight Show in its heyday when it was 90 minutes, where Johnny Carson would cut off the last two guests, or at SNL when the show's running long, they cut off the last sketch. They could have cut off 2 or 3 of the speakers.
Well, they did. They cut off James Taylor
and Debbie Wasserman Schutz
and Grace Meng.
Yeah.
No, okay. Well, that's true. Well, James Taylor also, I think it was a little
sparing
late.
us all.
A little late for James Taylor. It's a little late.
Well, I mean, he would have put us all to sleep. He would put Biden to sleep if he sang.
Yeah.
But I just think Kamala Harris should be in the room when Michelle Obama and Barack Obama praise her, right?
I don't agree. I think that this weird thing where the president is present during the convention, that's an artifact. Trump actually kind of started that. Classic rule of the convention is the president is nowhere.
They don't show
until
up, right?
Thursday night, until their wife, until their spouse. If their spouse speaks on Wednesday, they will surprise appear to give them a big hug. Or Obama surprise appeared in 2012 to give Clinton a big hug after what was admittedly an astounding speech by Clinton, Bill Clinton, defending Obama's record. Best speech Clinton ever gave at 2012, which is, I think, why he's doing the same thing on Wednesday night. I don't know if he can still do it. It's 12 years later, and he is pretty old himself, but
he's still pretty good.
He's probably still pretty. Do we know he's still pretty good?
Well, he did. Remember, they would trot him out for the fundraisers. It would be the traveling president show because Biden is incapable of doing it. So they would have him surrounded by Bill and Obama, and Bill is younger than Biden, but is more sprightly.
Okay, well, let me talk to you guys about our friends at Shopify. Creating really great retail experiences is tough, especially with multiple stores, teams of staff, fulfillment centers, separate workflows. It's a lot, but with Shopify Point of Sale, you can do it all without complexity. Shopify's Point of Sale system is a unified command center for your retail business. It brings together in-store and online operations, even across 1,000 locations. Imagine being able to guarantee that shopping is just always convenient. Aisle, ship to customer, buy online, pick up in store, all made simpler so customers can shop how and where they want, and staff have the tools they need to close the sale every time. Want more? Check out shopify.com/commentary on all lowercase. Commentary's got to be all lowercase if you want that special commentary offer, and learn how to create the best retail experience without complexity. Shopify.com/commentary. Now we have to go. I think we're going to skip the recommendation today. So bottom line, good night, bad night. They needed to do what they had to do. Energy in the room, media. They certainly had the media eating out of their hands. Although I got to say, at the very end, there was a kind of Biden. He got to where he needed to get to at the end about Kamala, because he was supposed to do the handoff to Kamala. They were a little disturbed that he made the speech about himself and not about her. But what's your take? Let's everybody.
Well, I think it was a good night for them. I mean, it was excruciating for me, but
it's more excruciating for you. Maybe the better for them. I don't know.
Well, that's usually the way it works. Yeah,
I'm trying to watch it through the eyes of a white working class voter in Pennsylvania, and I think if they tuned in at all last night, they didn't see anything that appeals to them. Anything.
I think that once they got past Kathy Hochul, it was smooth sailing. I don't know how you're supposed to follow that. I mean, there were moments that were really bad, like watching Kathy Hochul stumble through a speech with reaction, those reaction shots to the ticket, and Tim Walz and Kamala Harris chatting like they're bored out of their minds. There were moments where they were clearly losing this team. Also, I think that they did what they needed to do, most of all because abortion is this one issue that is just a kind of a nuclear. That's like if this were House of the Dragon, that's the dragon, right? That's what they have there. That's the trump card, or they hope it is. But it has been recently in elections. But I don't think they did the right thing with Joe at the end, because I thought they should have done one of two things: either have Biden give that speech about why you need to vote for Kamala and why you need to hand off to Kamala, or have it be a kind of retirement gold watch for he's a jolly good fellow ceremony, one or the other. I felt
I can explain
Biden
this.
Giving his stump speech
but
was wrong.
I can explain this to you. I can explain this to you.
All right.
They have less control than you think. Why do you think Chris Christie's speech in 2012 was such a disaster? The convention managers do not have control over the more powerful a figure is, the less control the Kamala team has over the text. And all conventions, you mentioned Hochul, and Hochul was preposterous, but all conventions have duds, like dud speakers, big mistakes, 20 minutes of dead time with somebody who makes a mistake.
Empty chair.
Well, the empty chair is a whole other story that would take hours to explain. But I'm just saying they did not have any control over what Biden was doing, and he was going to do what he was going to do. So that's an important note. I think that Christine, where are you on last night?
I mean, the thing I felt like it was kind of losers and loose cannons night, right? The people who are the losers, that's Hillary and Biden. The loose cannons like AOC and some others. Hochul, you might put some of those other folks in there too. But I'll only remember him yelling at us angrily. I'm not angry about being forced out, and then the equivocation about the protesters who were in fact waving Hamas flags outside the DNC convention. Right. And if we saw Nazi flags outside the RNC, we would have had a lot of stories about that, and I've seen nothing about that in the mainstream press.
I think Matt has this absolutely right. I think that this election is going to be decided the way every election since 2012 has been decided, including the 2012 election, which was fundamentally won in Ohio, even though Obama won a lot more electoral votes in Ohio, by Obama spending $100 million to paint Mitt Romney as this, hedge fund guy who wouldn't let you get treatment for cancer and stuff like that. We are no different. The states are the same. The race is the same, and that was a coalition of the ascendant, multi-culti night that spoke to the idea that Harris and the team believes that they need to accelerate African American support for their ticket by highlighting stories of African Americans and African American politicians and all of that. And it's not that it's a zero-sum game because they have 4 days, but that was like, what are they even talking about that has any relevance to my life? I don't care about Project 2025. By the way, the white working class male who has decided each of these elections, white working class male doesn't care about abortion.
I don't think Andy Bashir was enough for him. Andy Bashir, who spoke about abortion. Yes, you have the governor of Kentucky here, the Democrat governor of Kentucky, who has clearly demonstrated an ability to appeal to blue-collar voters, and you have him talk about reproductive rights? That makes no sense to me. Why aren't you talking about the economy? And the only economic messaging was the unions. And you had the head of the UAW go after Stellantis in the middle of the convention.
By the way, can we talk? Okay, we are going on too long, but this is really important. There was like 45 minutes of union talk. So I swear to God, 6% of the American workforce works for private sector unions. 32% of the state employed workforce works for unions. Overall, 10% of the American people work for unions. That is a bizarre misbalancing to center your conversation that much on union voters. Because
wasn't that specifically to counter the feeling that the unions had given Republicans an opening at the RNC?
I'm sure it was.
But not only that, I think the same way that a lot of identitarian social justice talk is actually aimed at comfortable white people, a lot of union talk is aimed at it. There's a virtue signaling aspect of it. It's to make people who have nothing to do with unions feel good and righteous about themselves.
I think that's absolutely true. And unions do poll well, but they poll well in a kind of head patting way. It's like, oh, that's so nice. Unions are so Norma Ray, and I love you look for the union label, and you're so cute being in your union and everything. Thank God I don't have a union, but I mean, you guys are so great with your union. I mean, that is really such a, it's like vinyl for white liberals. It's like that's so authentic. The union on the factory.
They have a whole collection.
If you're a Hispanic contractor in Nevada.
You hate the union.
And you tuned in that convention last night.
Yeah.
Did you see anything that spoke to what your daily life is like? It's very hard for me. Watching that convention, you would think that the country is 50% labor and 60% people of color.
Yeah.
This is a complete reversal of what the actual American population is.
So they have 3 days to go, and the image of the first night is necessarily. No,
I mean that's the point. I mean, like I mentioned yesterday, the Bubba night is Wednesday, so I think that it's just important to hold
Clinton's
off. Like,
not a Bubba.
Well, Clinton not a Bubba.
Walls, he really Clinton. Okay,
but Bubba's like him. Bubba's like him. Look, here's a Democrat who won West Virginia. That's what this is. They're going to
30 years
plan for. They're going to plan for Wednesday night being that night.
Remember when we could win West Virginia?
But if that's their Bubba, not to be JD Vance, not to play the game they're playing with JD Vance, but if the Georgetown and Yale Law School graduate who dodged the draft and had to be thrown out of office after his first term in Arkansas because he was too liberal, is your Bubba? Because his mother was like a drunk in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Fine, but I mean, that was 70 years ago. And,
John, do you even know what a runza is?
It's a sandwich.
We went through this.
Hero ain't nothing but a sandwich. That's all I got to say.
I just want to say. But I do think the first night accomplished some things. Again, as I say, it was excruciating for me. But they shuffled Biden off the stage for good, which I think they needed to do, and they're happy enough with the way that happened. I do think they humanized Kamala through the stories that Matt refers to. I think some of those were very effective. The childhood stories, whether they happened, whether it didn't happen. And I think they actually breathed new life into what I have felt for a long time are very old attacks on Trump. I think they were effective, very hard hitting, and it's going to get under his skin. And they hammered the abortion point home. That's not a bad catch for the first time.
So like Tevye, I'm going to say that Matt's right. And you're also right, even though you're contradicting each other in a weird way. That if the lines of attack against Trump are going to be he's a felon and reminding people that he's a felon, I don't think that's a mistake. I know a lot of right wingers think that it's a mistake because they live in a world in which Trump is a persecuted figure. But I don't know that again, those 9 or 10% of people in the middle who don't know how they're going to vote yet are have any sense of that conversation exactly. And they do need to hammer that home. And it's going to be reinforced, obviously, by what happens, I assume, in September when Merchan sentences him. Although there is the possibility that he won't. I doubt it. I mean, the whole point of even holding the trial was to make sure that he could be sentenced before the election. So Merchan could have postponed the trial until after the election also. Anyway.
It was funny, by the way, to see leftists on Twitter saying, we've tried to get you guys to call them justice impacted people, not convicted felons.
Yeah.
There's a whole internal fight over the way that they're using the convicted felon in a way that, like, criminal justice reformers, we've been spending 30 years trying to get you guys not to do this, but that's what they chose to do with the Kamala the cop is where they've chosen to go. So Makes sense.
There we have it. Okay, well, we will be back tomorrow for Seth, Matt, Christine, and Abe. I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.